I'm grateful this week to follow up on last week's video on the church's teaching on the death penalty. I've had several people stop me and say in a lot of different ways, Father, this is a really hard question. And on upholding the church's teaching on the sanctity of life from conception to natural death, and specifically in regard to the death penalty. One parishioner wrote in a note after last week's video and say, well, Father, doesn't the Bible say an eye for an eye? And that, first of all, it's absolutely true that it does say that. It was given as part of the law given to Moses. And I think even more insightfully, Jesus took up the same question during the Sermon on the Mount. And specifically, Jesus said that you have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, offer no resistance to one who is evil. And the important thing to understand is that Jewish scholars, in commenting on Mosaic law, point out that that statement was never intended to legitimize retribution. That in Old Testament times, when they said an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, it was used as a measure for providing compensation to a victim. So if a person loses an eye, they're to be compensated with the value of an eye. If a person loses a tooth, they are to receive something that is of the same value as a tooth. It was never meant to say, well, if a person loses an eye, then the person who took their eye should lose their eye. Again, Jewish scholars have always taught that it's not about retribution, it's about proper compensation for someone who has offered a loss. And Jesus, I think, because he knows that we're tempted particularly under stressful situations, to seek retribution or to seek revenge against someone who has injured an innocent person, and that it seems just to make what the perpetrator loses equal to what the victim lost. But again, there are no exceptions to the church's teaching on the sanctity of life, just as there's nothing that grants a person the right to life when they are conceived. There is no earthly condition that deprives the person of their right to life, um, all the way to natural death, including any crime, no matter how horrendous that crime may be. There's no legitimate basis for depriving that person of their life. And again, it all comes back to God's love for every soul and God's plan for every soul to be gathered back to himself. So in these circumstances, we pray for victims. We pray for the repose of the souls of anyone who has died. We pray for the consolation and peace of anyone who mourns their loss. We also pray for the protection of anyone who may be threatened or may be finding themselves in a dangerous position. I pray in a very special way for our armed forces. I pray in a very special way for our first responders, that as they carry out their duties, they will maintain a safe environment for themselves, and that in all cases they will go home safely to their homes and to their families. And so be reassured that I am with you in all of these things, and most especially the hard questions like this one. And remember, God is who he says he is, you are who he says you are, and live the life that he calls you to live.